The wave is not separate from the ocean. It's not something other than the ocean. It's simply an individual arising of the ocean in magnificent, glorious, blessed individual form. And when that expression is complete, the wave recedes back into the ocean, whence it came. Thus, we understand who we are in relationship to God. I'm not saying that I'm God, but I'm saying that I am an individuation of the divine. I'm, to use the analogy, a wave on the ocean of divinity, as is everyone else. So what God said to me when she shared with me that analogy, she said, Neale, go out there and make waves.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to season 2 of the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast with your host, Harrison Ma. This podcast sets the loving intention of creating the mystical space needed to pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. Now let's walk you home to your cosmic spiritual heart space. Good morning, evening, afternoon, magical beings. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the Cosmic Love Antenna. I am really honored and grateful and excited to bring this conversation to you today from my heart in collaboration with an even powerful, mystical, spiritual heart that is the man that is Neale Donald Walsch. Before I get into all of who he is and everything we're going to get into today, I want to remind everyone that's joining either live or tuning into the podcast, I'd really encourage you to share any comments and questions and feedback that comes up today as we discuss and have this conversation with Neale. We're going to get really deep into all things God and spirituality. So if you're watching on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, please pop in your comments and questions as we flow. And if this podcast today hits your heart, please share it out far and wide with someone you think it can impact in your life at a very deep level. The man, the mystic, the loving heart that is Neale Donald Walsch. If you haven't heard of this soul, Neale Donald Walsch is an author of the best-selling Conversations with God series. He is the author of 39 books in total on contemporary spirituality and its practical application in this 3D world, which to me is so important in this expansion that we're all going through to. And today, I have the pleasure to chat with Neale about his new book, The God Solution. And we're going to chat about all things, not just God, spirituality, but what are some of the biggest problems in the world around us today? What are some of the solutions? Where does religion come in? What is missing in our understanding? And ultimately, where does divine love seep into this conversation? Neale, it's a divine pleasure to welcome you to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Thank you, Harrison. It's lovely to be here with you. How may I serve the moment?
Well, Neale, I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question to begin with, so I really appreciate it. I guess where we can start, I just want to go straight in, Neale, because I think out of other conversations I've had, this one, it feels I have the most permission to go as deep as possible. So I want to ask the question to begin this exploration with you. In your opinion, what do you think is the biggest problem we have in the world today?
The biggest problem in the world today, as I observe it, is that most of the people in positions to do anything about it don't know what the biggest problem in the world today is. Chiefs of state, the heads of our world's major religions, the top brass in the world's major corporations, people of power and influence in the world don't seem to understand what the biggest problem in the world today is. So that is the biggest problem in the world today, that people don't understand what the biggest problem in the world today is. I can put the problem in one word for you and for all of those people who don't understand what it is. But I won't do that unless I'm asked to.
Well, I think, Neale, I think I could probably guess. Probably starts with a G and ends with a D, or starts with an L and ends with an E. Am I Am I close there at all?
No, the biggest problem in the world today starts with an A and ends with an N.
Give it to me.
Alienation.
Go deeper into that.
Harrison, I'm going to be 80 years old soon. And I can tell you in my nearly 80 years, I have never experienced the level of alienation in the world at large that I'm experiencing in these days and times. Alienation, nation between nation, people of different races, people of different religions, people even of different age groups, people of different genders, people of different economic levels. You know, if you're different from me and don't agree with everything that I believe, if you belong to a different political party or whatever, I'm going to be alienated from you, and I may even express my alienation in ways that are hurtful and damaging, and even physically destructive. So I've never seen this level of alienation, Harrison. When I was a younger man, of course there were differences of opinion. People had always had differences, but I have never seen the level of animosity and negative energetic expression that I'm seeing these days. And that's why I say the biggest problem in the world is alienation. And the second biggest problem in the world is that most people in positions to do anything about it do not know the root cause of alienation. You know, they believe that the root cause of their alienation has to do with the differences that they experience with other people. You have a different skin color. You have a different religion. You have a different economic status. You belong to a different nation. But that really is not, in my awareness or in my experience, the true root cause of our alienation and of the animosity that comes up between us. What stops us? What stops us from being gentle and kind with each other? What causes us to imagine that the most appropriate way to deal with our differences is through animosity and verbal attack and even physical attack? And I don't really see, not to go on forever and ever, Harrison, but my last sentence on that topic would be, I don't really see people who are in those positions of power, chiefs of state, heads of our world's religions, the top people in our world's corporations. I don't see people in those positions of influence and power addressing the root cause of our response to our alienation.
Yeah. Well, Neale, I think anyone tuning in or watching live today would not disagree with your analysis. And on this show, Neale, you're not aware of this, but people have tuned in for different episodes. One of the big themes I speak about here is making the unconscious conscious, right? Bringing our internal, I refer to it as our lantern of love, our loving awareness into that which is unconscious inside of us to consciously shift it and change it. And the reason I bring that up, Neale, is when I look at those leaders that you speak about, I see them as hurt little children, right? I see them as souls that, while their actions should never be justified and they need to take responsibility and things need to change, obviously, there is a lot of unconscious projection going on, right? There's a lot of internal shadows being suppressed, right? So I guess what this leads to here, Neale, that I want to ask you, where does God come into this? Where does this loving presence come in as a solution possibly for this?
Yeah, that's a very important question, Harrison, obviously. And let me contextualize the question itself, because some people might say, hey, what makes you think that people even believe in God. So let me just let all of the people who are watching us now know that surveys have been taken in the past several years. I'm not talking about 50 or 100 years ago. I mean, in the past 10 years and in the past 5 years, anthropologists have taken surveys in virtually every nation on the planet. It's a one-question survey. Single question. Do you believe in a higher power?
Mm.
Most people are shocked to find out that, in fact, the results of that survey show that 8 out of 10 people on the planet, from culture to culture, from nation to nation, from economic group to economic group, from race to race, that 8 out of 10 people on this planet believe in a higher power. So we all agree that there is something more going on here than meets the eye, if you please.
Yeah.
The challenge is that we can't agree on what that higher power is, what, if anything, it wants, what, if anything, it does if it does not get what it wants, and if it really does exist, why it doesn't do something about the mess that the world is in today. And no one is addressing those questions. I don't see any chief of state. I don't see any president, any prime minister, anyone who's any king, any royalty. I don't see anyone who's heading any nation addressing that question. Sadly, I don't even see any head of a world religion addressing that question head on. So I think we need to take a look at that. If there really is a higher power, why isn't, well, let's call it God for lack of a better word. If there really is a God, why isn't this essence, this entity, doing something about what a horrible situation we are now finding ourselves in, economically, ecologically, politically, socially, and spiritually on this planet?
Yeah. I want to dive into this why, Neale, but before I do, I just want to acknowledge, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I don't think it's just all these different groups agreeing on what God is. I think it's also, and I want to get your opinions on this, it's also where God is. So, for example, I grew up, and I've shared this many times on the podcast, I grew up in the Catholic faith, and I was taught that my Catholic God was a man with a very big beard on a cloud externally outside of me. And while the what was definitely there was a lot of confusion created around little Harry trying to understand what that is, I think the thing that perpetuated a lot of the trauma and the fear and the tension was the location of God. It wasn't in me, it was something outside of me. So I'm wondering, is this also a challenge, Neale, in your experience?
Of course. I wanted to find a way to give you an unexpected answer because I'm writing a book soon called Unexpected Answers. But to stay serious on this topic, of course, it's a major, major, major problem. In fact, it is the source of the biggest problem in the world today, in my opinion. I believe that the source of the biggest problem in the world today, alienation, is our notion that God is separate from us. God's somewhere out there in the cosmos, whoever and whatever it is. Whatever it is, it's nowhere near us. It's way out there in the cosmos, and it's looking down upon us, and we had better do what it has told us to do. And by the way, there are a lot of questions about what it's really telling us to do. I don't know whether people are aware of this statistic either, but there are over 4,200 religions on the face of the earth right now. That's right, folks. You heard me correctly. Check it out. Don't believe me. Just Google the question. How many religions are there on the planet? Not throughout human history. I mean, in this moment, 4,200 religions on the planet and faith traditions being practiced right now. So the challenge is that many of those religions are giving us instructions on what it is that this God that we believe in wants, or if you please, requires. And they're telling us what happens if we don't do what God requires. Even though the religions can't agree on what it is that God requires, most of the religions have some notion that their particular religion is the one that has the one true word about that. In fact, I was also born and raised a Catholic. And as a young Catholic boy, I remember, I was so honored to be asked by the man across the street. He was a young man. He was about 23. But he babysat with me when I was a younger child. And of course, we became friends as he grew older and I grew older. And in my late teen years, he asked me if I would be the best man at his wedding. And I had to turn him down because when I shared this joy with the nun in the school that I went to, a Catholic school, she said, well, what church is he getting married in? And I mentioned that he was getting married in a Lutheran church. She said, you can't go. The church would not allow me to even attend a church service in another church. It was supposed to be a sin to do so. So I had to turn down, but I didn't, of course. I went ahead and did it anyway. And so I was therefore considered a sinner. Then I had to confess my sins, and get. In fact, what the priest told me when I was 9 years old was that if I don't attend church in my church, if I miss Mass on any Sunday of my life without a good excuse, if you're caring for a sick parent, fair enough. Or if you're an adult and you have to work on Sunday, okay. But if you just go to play a game of golf or just decide to not go to church that Sunday, it's considered to be a mortal sin.
Yeah.
That is, the priest was telling me, Neale, if you miss Mass on Sunday without a good excuse, it better be a good excuse. If you just don't go to church and you get hit by a car on Monday, God forbid, and you should die, you will go straight to hell.
Yeah.
I'm talking about everlasting torture and damnation in the fires of hell for missing church one Sunday. Yeah. Now, there's a church, there's a religion, if you please, that uses fear as a magnet to get people to go to church.
I want to dive into this, Neale, because we're bringing it up, and this is so important.
Better be careful because you're going to go to hell.
Yeah. So I just want to welcome, before we get into it, I want to welcome Jacqueline, our mutual friend, Jacqueline Way, is joining us on LinkedIn. She's watching this conversation. Catherine and Cliff, thank you for joining the broadcast. If you have any questions, comments, either on LinkedIn or Facebook today that pop up for Neale and I, please pop them in. I'd love to add them into the chat. Neale, I want to go into this fear within the religious institutions because I have a theory that I want to pass by you and see how you feel about it, because I think this is a part, in my opinion, of the God solution. And it's this understanding that the deeper I go into my spiritual journey and my relationship with different religious groups and communities and ideologies, something I'm starting to notice is at the root of all of the religious ideologies I've found, there are these beautiful mystical foundations of love and unity and spiritual connection and awakening. However, as we start to go up on those layers of those different ideologies, you spoke about all the different groups with the number that you gave. Each of these different groups has these layers of fear consciousness on top of the mystical roots of that religion. So this is what I want to get your thoughts on, Neale. Is it the religious foundations and institutions that are the challenge, or is it the man-made fear consciousness that is propagated as dogma throughout it?
Well, it's both, because religions are not a standalone experience. They're headed by human beings. And so really, it's both. It's not one or the other. The human beings who are at the top levels of the world's religions are simply instilling by allowing fear to be running rampant in the members of that religion, by allowing fear to be a major aspect, fear of God, fear of God's judgment, fear of God's punishment, fear of God itself, by not denouncing, by not relinquishing, by not rejecting any thought that God would ever do anything bad to any of us for any reason whatsoever. By not doing so, the answer to your question is both. It's the world's religions, and it's the fear that people carry inside of them, that the world's religions have not removed through dogmatic teachings that tell us the truth about God.
Mm. Yeah.
I've said for many years now that I'm not anti-religious. I agree with you. I agree with your assessment that the world's religions have at their root wonderful spiritual insights, deep spiritual understandings, and astonishing spiritual clarity. There's no question about that. Or they wouldn't have lasted as many years as they've lasted. So people really gravitate toward that wisdom, and they embrace the wisdom that they find at the root of most of the world's religions. All we have to do is get rid of the aspects of religions that are not serving us. The challenge with the world's religions is not that they don't have wonderful teachings and great insight and great wisdom. The challenge with the world's religions is they are simply incomplete.
Yeah.
You know, one of the analogies that I use, Harrison, is, we are like children who think that because we've learned how to add and subtract, that we know everything there is to know about mathematics. So, but there's more to mathematics than adding and subtracting. And sooner or later we realize, oh my gosh, there's long division. Oh my gosh, there's multiplication. Oh my gosh, there's algebra. Oh my heavens, there's geometry. Oh goodness, there's higher math. Oh my gosh. And so there's more going on, as I said a minute ago, than meets the eye, or as Shakespeare so wonderfully put it in Hamlet, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. But our religions are incomplete. They don't have the whole story. They only claim to have the whole story.
Yeah. It's selective in many cases, right? It's selective. And I think the paradox here, Neale, is that, as we come back to the deeper truths, the higher truths, the multiplication and the higher math, as you were calling it, it's not an adding of, it's a coming back to, right? That truth is inside of us, which brings me to a quote I want to share from you, Neale, to you. And this is really something that has helped me come to this deeper truth and moving through all this separation energy. In your book, there's a quote from you: every theology on the planet is founded on the idea of a befuddled higher power who is the creator of all and the source of everything, yet can somehow be displeased with something that the higher power itself has empowered. And
I hope that everybody heard what you just said.
Yeah.
We're talking about a God who can somehow be befuddled by the outcome of what the higher power itself has created. If the higher power is the creation of everything, then somebody explain it to me. What's going on here? There's another powerful question that I invite people to ask, even people who might be disagreeing with what they're hearing right now on this program. There may be some people who are turning this program off right now, saying, atheists, New Agers, whatever they want to call us. And that's fair. It's fair for people to have different opinions. But I'm going to invite people to consider whether the following question has any value. Here's the question. Is it possible, just possible, that there's something we don't fully understand here about God, about life, and about each other, the understanding of which would change everything? The understanding of which would change everything. Or do we think, no, Neale, no, we know it all. We know all there is to know. It's all right there in the book. Which book? Well, you know which book, the book that we gave you to read. Well, interestingly enough, there are, some 400 individual holy scriptures on the planet right now. So, yeah. Which book are we supposed to read? Oh, it's the Bhagavad Gita, of course. What's the matter with me? No, it's the Book of Mormon. Neale, what's the matter with you? It's the Quran. What's the matter with you, Neale? It's the Bible. Oh, I see. It all depends on which book you agree with. So what we're doing is we're cherry picking our beliefs about God to suit what our culture has told us must be true.
I think a big part of that, Neale, is our beautiful ego identity, right? Our beautiful ego that does a really good job in reminding us that we are these external things, that we are this external belief system, this external book, this external scripture reading that I tuned into today. And I think a solution to this, and I'll get your thoughts on this, Neale, a solution that I've come back to help me, I sort of lose myself in that funny image you gave just then of all these different scriptures and just bouncing back and forth between all of them. A solution to get beyond the ego that thinks it's just one of those and puts up its dogmatic barriers is dropping into your heart. And specifically, let's get just a bit more practical here, asking your intuition, right? Instead of thinking about what is religiously, scripturally, dogmatically correct, starting to tune into your feeling body. What are your thoughts on this, Neale, as a solution?
Well, again, I agree with every word you've just spoken. Who could disagree? Yes, the opportunity for what I think, Harrison, is that most people know in their heart of hearts, at the feeling level, most people know that what we've been told about God, some of the things we've been told about God, can't be true. It can't be the way it is. It simply doesn't make sense. So I think we understand that there is something that we have not fully embraced, the awareness of which would in fact change everything. But here's the problem. We have done in the area of God, let's call it theology. Let's use the word theology. We've done in the area of theology, the summation of our most sacred beliefs. We have done something that we have not done in any other important area in our life. We haven't done it in science. We haven't done it in medicine. We haven't done it in technology. We've only done it in theology. We have refused to question the prior assumption. In science, the minute a scientist imagines that she has discovered something, she questions the prior assumption upon which she has based her latest information or the prior information. The moment that someone in the world of medicine feels that they have come up with a cure for some kind of a disease or illness, the first thing they do is question the prior assumptions on which their medicine was previously based. The first thing that people do in technology as well is question the prior assumption. Is it true? Or is it possibly not complete in its awareness? But in the area of theology, you're not allowed to question the prior assumption. You will stick with what you and all human beings have been told for thousands and thousands of years. You will not question the prior assumption. And in fact, to question what we are told by the world's religions is considered by some of those religions outright blasphemy, heresy. Also, there are some religions on the earth that if you question their beliefs, you're subject to death. The death penalty.
Well, this is the reason, Neale. I go back to your example that you shared at the start of all these world leaders that are speaking from this place of ideology and dogma and separation and anxiety. It comes from a place of wanting to feel safe, right? I'll just speak for myself, right? If I have grown up seeking a tribe or seeking a community or seeking connection, which we all do, and I find it in a religious ideology, community, group, family even, it gives me that, I'm going to call it a false, but it does give me a sense of security, safety.
Temporarily,
yeah.
As long as we fear death, we will never feel safe completely.
Yeah.
As long as we fear and misunderstand what death really is, we will always feel unsafe, and we will protect ourselves from the great danger called death. And we'll do whatever it takes to protect ourselves. We'll do whatever it takes to survive. And by the way, I'm not the only person to make that observation. Most of the world's anthropologists have told us that the primary instinct, the basic instinct of humanity is survival. They're wrong, of course. The basic instinct of humanity is not survival. If that was the basic instinct, humanity would not act the way humanity does act. Individuals would not do what individuals do when they're faced with certain moments that call upon them to respond from their true basic instinct. Just to give you an example, I like to share with my audiences when I talk about this. Imagine you're walking down the street and you turn to the left and realize, oh my gosh, there's a building on fire. And does anybody know that? Is anybody seeing this building on fire? And then a lady on the second floor reaches out of the window holding a tiny baby, can't be 1 year old. She said, help me. Don't even worry about me. Save my baby, help me. What does the average person do? Turn around and run away? Say, oh, I'll have to wait until the first responders get here. It could be a while. Of course not. The average person would race into that building to do what it could for both the baby and the baby's mother. And they would do that without thinking, because the fundamental instinct of humanity is the expression of divinity, not survival. The question on a person's mind at moments like that is not whether I will continue living, but how.
Mm-hmm.
Not whether I will have 20 more minutes or 20 more years on the planet, but what will that look like? And what will that say to me about me? But if we are afraid of death, if we think that death is the cessation of everything, the end of our story, the end of our individual experience of who we are, then we may, in fact, be paralyzed, even in moments like that. But what happens, thank goodness, for most people, in moments like that when the chips are down. By the way, there was this wonderful story that made all the newspapers about 3 or 4 years ago. This is not a made-up example. There was a little child who fell onto the tracks at the New York subway station in New York City. And a man, people, of course, were horrified that this little toddler tumbled and fell off the platform onto the tracks of the oncoming subway, just as they could hear the subway train roaring into the station. And a man jumped off the platform, threw his body over the child in between the rails of that track, and the subway train came in on top of them. And when the subway train passed and stopped, he managed to survive. And of course, he saved the life of the child. And the reporters were all over the place when they were called, and the newspapers and the TV stations were there, and they were saying, this guy's a hero. He's a hero. And he said, no, not a hero. I did what anybody would do.
Yeah.
This is a true story. You can read about it.
I believe it, Neale. And it shows something very significant. So first of all, thank you for sharing that. You don't know this, Neale, but the show, Cosmic Love Antenna, the reason I refer to it as the Cosmic Love Antenna, because to me, that divine that we all are is that love, right? That man that took that choice and threw himself. He was connected to the divine, but he was connected to this space of unconditional love. And I think you're so right with your understanding of this misconception around what death actually is, right? In many ways, we could say, what are we at a base level? We're energy. And we know that energy is not created or destroyed. It's either it's transforming, it's moving or transforming into something else. So I want to tie this in, Neale, with a question that you posed at the start that I want to come back to and see if we can link these two together. You mentioned that there's so many questions, not just around God, but this, if God is real, if God is a thing, if God is a part of me, or I'm connected to God, why is there so much badness, evil, suffering happening in the world?
Well, because we don't know that, because we don't know who we really are. Well, I'd like to just take a minute, if I could, to explain that, because some people, when I've talked in this way in front of a crowd, in the days when we actually had public events with more than two people in the room, but somebody would inevitably get up in the back of the room, and question me. What are you saying? What are you trying to say? You're God? Trying to say that we're God? Come on, Neale. And I have to explain to them, wait a minute, whoa, wait. The relationship between you and God is the same as the relationship between a wave and the ocean, to use an analogy.
Mm.
The wave is not separate from the ocean. It's not something other than the ocean. It's simply an individual arising of the ocean in magnificent, glorious, blessed individual form. And when that expression is complete, the wave recedes back into the ocean, whence it came. Thus, we understand who we are in relationship to God. I'm not saying that I'm God, but I'm saying that I am an individuation of the divine. I'm, to use the analogy, a wave on the ocean of divinity, as is everyone else. So what God said to me when she shared with me that analogy, she said, Neale, go out there and make waves.
Yeah. I love it. I often quote Rumi on this podcast, Neale, and I'm sure you're very familiar with the mystic that was Rumi. And one of my top 3 Rumi quotes is, we're not a drop in the ocean, we are an ocean in a drop. And I think the image of the ocean vastness expanding into unique individuations, into waves, is a beautiful descriptor of it. But it brings up a question, Neale. Why do so much of us along this remembering, awakening experience, why do we have so much trouble coming back to that truth?
Because we're afraid. Harrison, we're simply afraid. We're afraid of dying. We're afraid of every other outcome that's less than death, but could be equally torturous or damaging. We're afraid of being late for work, for heaven's sake. We're afraid of missing the subway. Talking about subways, we're afraid of everything. We live in fear, and because we don't know who we really are. And I would like to think that human beings could come to a new place, a new way of living their life, without having to go through hell in order to get to heaven. That's a wonderful statement that God made to me in conversations with God. He said, Neale, you don't have to go through hell to get to heaven. I know you think you do, but you don't have to go through hell to get to heaven. So what I have done is I've just set fear aside. There's a wonderful acronym for fear that is used in some New Age places. Feeling, excited and ready is my acronym.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. some say false evidence appearing real.
That's the one I've used. Yeah.
My favorite one is feeling excited and ready.
I love that.
Yeah, because that's I remember when I was like, it's a total reframing. It's like when I was 9 years old and I was standing in line to get on the roller coaster at the county fair, and I had my 25 cents for my ticket, and I heard all the kids screaming and hollering in fear, and I thought, do I really want to get on the roller coaster? Oh my God, they're all screaming in fear. But I gave the guy my quarter anyway. Give me the ticket. I'm getting on the roller coaster because I was feeling excited and ready.
I love it. I'm going to have to steal that from you, Neale, and definitely.
And of course, you know the other acronym for fear: F everything and run.
That one has less results, I feel.
Yeah,
Neale, I want to share something. I want to share something with you in relation to this this fear component, and I just want to make sure people hear this. You know, fear. I think one of the reasons fear is so hard to overcome is, I know in my journey, I've made it out to be this big thing that is insurmountable. But that's not what Neale is saying. Neale, and I would say that it's a moment by moment choice that we can choose to step into, right? But Neale, an affirmation that I use that I want to share with you in relation to this sort of stepping through or beyond or past the fear in the moment is, I often place my hands on my heart in that moment of fear, and I ask and express the affirmation, what would love do? What would it look like if in this moment, instead of fear, I made a choice not just from my heart, but from an embodiment of love? What are your thoughts?
Let me offer a thought since you asked me. I want to make it clear to people who are watching us now that, in my opinion at least, fear and love are not opposites. It's not like fear's over here and love's over here and they're opposites. Fear is an expression of love. If we didn't love ourselves, we wouldn't fear dying. If we didn't love anything, we wouldn't fear losing it or not having it. We therefore know that fear is an expression of love. So when I put my hand on my heart, I don't necessarily ask, what would love do? Now, it's a great question, but I reframe the question. If I could change what love is now doing, love is fearing. Fear is an expression of love. If I didn't love spaghetti, I wouldn't be afraid of never having it again for the rest of my life. I wouldn't give a damn one way or the other. But I put my hand on my heart and I say, in what way can I expand my expression of love to alter the energetic that we call fear into the energetic that we call strength, courage, awareness, and okayness with what is now going on. You know, Harrison, I don't know whether all of your viewers are aware of it, but I, in my life, wound up spending a year of my life on the sidewalk. I mean, I was what we say I was homeless. I was what we call in America a street person. That is, I woke up every day after sleeping on the concrete. I woke up every morning without a nickel in my pocket, not knowing whether I'd ever eat that day, holding my hand out to people on the street, saying anything would help, anything would help. And living that way for a solid year of my life. How it happened doesn't matter. It's just a circumstance, situations that produce such an outcome. But I lived on the street for a year of my life. You really don't know what it's like to have absolutely nothing at all. I mean, it's raining, it's pouring, or it's the middle of the coldest month of the year. And you're freezing on the ground, trying to get a little bit of sleep on the ground. And then the rains come to make matters worse. And you can't get out of the weather. And then if you do manage to get a few pesos or a few dollars or a few euros from somebody on the street, enough to buy a little bit to eat, then you have to figure out where you're going to go to the bathroom. And so you have to sneak into the back of restaurants. because the managers see you with your unwashed hair, and they can smell you a mile away. You haven't had a shower or a bath in months, and they rush over to you. No. So out, not in here, because what they've experienced is that homeless people often go into places like that, restaurants, and they start going from table to table to see if they can, rustle up a few dollars. And so you're not even allowed to go into a place of business like that and maybe use the restroom. Talk about losing your dignity. I can recall standing in front of one manager of a restaurant. She happened to be a woman. She said, please don't come in. I said, ma'am, honestly, I need 6 minutes. I swear to you. I need to use the bathroom. I'll come in and I'll leave immediately. She looked at me and she said, promise? In and out, in and out. I said, yes, ma'am. I promise. She let me use the facility. And I scrammed as soon as I was finished. I left there. And you know what? That lady recognized me every day. And for the rest of that year, she said, okay, friend, okay. In and out. You keep your word, I'll keep my word. And I finally, after being on the street for 6 or 7 months, had a place to go to the bathroom. So now when you've moved through that kind of experience, I share that story not to get people to feel sorry for me, but to get them to understand, oh, he's not just talking theory. He's not just talking concepts. This guy has lived it. This guy has lived having nothing, having nothing. And he understands the difference between having nothing and having what love will bring you. That woman who ran that restaurant had enough love in her heart for humanity to say, okay, all right, in and out.
Neale, so firstly, thank you for sharing that beautiful story. And it actually highlights something else very significant and important that I want to pull out and reflect back to you. Not just that divine love that she showed you, but for you on your personal journey, it also highlights the role of our pain, our shadows coming up to help us awaken deeper. And I want to share something with you, a story back to you here, Neale, and get your thoughts on this. And it's also a way for me to thank you in a way. Our mutual friend Jacqueline shared with you a question that I had on my heart very recently, and it was connected to sharing creative work with the world. And the question alluded to the idea of if we decide to share our creative work with the world, and that creative work then receives not just positive feedback, but negative feedback, that you as the creator of sharing such spiritual work, not only is that not a slight on you, but it's actually you stepping into your role. Because in that instance, what you're doing is through your creation energy, you're helping people meet their shadows, their unconscious elements. So I want to get your thoughts on this, Neale. You know, along this God solution and this journey that we're all taking, what are your feelings around the role of, you know, meeting our darkness, meeting our shadows, meeting our lowest points, as you may have done in that experience of being homeless?
I'd like to reflect my thought that it's not my understanding that we have a role to play in life. You know, I was not given a role to play. God did not say, you know, somewhere in the by and by, and then, Neale, I want you to go down there and write a series of books and, you know, touch people's lives and give people back to themselves, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want, because the danger of thinking that there's a role we have to play is that we then start searching for what that role is. I mean, we walk through our life, we might spend years thinking to ourselves, why would God have a purpose for me and then not tell me what it is? What kind of a deity would do that? I mean, can you see God up there going, I got it. Let's make sure that Michael understands he's got a terrific role to play, but don't tell him what the role is. Let's just let him suffer for about 35 years trying to figure it out all by himself. Look at him down there, how frustrated he is. That's not the God we have. And God says to us, play any role that pleases you. But be sure that what pleases you does not injure, hurt, damage, or harm another. If you can live by that simple rule, or as one of my friends said a few years ago, do unto others as you would have it done unto you. If you're willing to live by that one simple rule, then allow yourself to choose the role that feels best for you. You can be a plumber in Cincinnati. You don't have to be writing best-selling books. One role isn't somehow more elevated or better than another. I use the example of a plumber because I had a guy. He came to my house a few years ago. He was under the sink, fixing some plumbing problems we had in the kitchen. There was water all over the place. We didn't know what was going on. He came in and he was under that sink, for about 25 or 30 minutes trying to work it out and figure it out. And he got it fixed. But he was in such a good mood. And he was whistling and humming a little song. And he was so kind to my wife and I. I never met a guy who was more kind to a total stranger. He was just a gentle person. And I said, wow, you really like what you do, don't you? He said, of course I do. He said, I've been given a talent to help people when they really need help. If you don't think that you really need help, have a plumbing problem one day, and you'll find out what that's about. So he said, I've been given the talent and the ability and the skill to help people when they really need a little assistance. And who wouldn't want to spend their whole day doing that? And then I realized, wow, you know what's interesting? You know what's fun to contemplate? We're all helping each other. No matter what we're doing. I don't care if you're a teller at a bank, a plumber in Cincinnati, or the author of a book. I don't care whether you're a teacher of a third grade class in Australia, or whether you're a policeman on the sidewalk in Dresden. Whatever you're doing, you're helping someone else.
Yeah.
And if you see it that way and inject it with all the love in your heart, wow.
Yeah.
Be careful, because your life will never be the same.
Yeah. It's often that injection of love too, Neale, that is what helps you shine the most in the thing that you're doing, right? I'm so happy that you've brought up this sort of purpose and role conversation, because I could not agree more. I feel that the inspired action that you decide to take, in this example, the action being the different position, work, career that you decide to do, it spills out of a primary reconnection to that source inside, or that presence inside. Which brings me to one of the last questions I want to throw at you here, Neale. Over the last couple of years and world events that have played out at a global scale, we've seen a lot that has moved through the collective. And when I sit with this God solution, a lot of the ideas that you've presented in your beautiful book and a lot of what we've discussed today, I can't help but want to apply this solution to these events that are shifting and changing all the time. So my question for you, Neale, is when you sit with this God solution and this reawakening and remembering, what do you see? What do you predict us as a collective sort of stepping into?
Let's first talk about what the actual God solution is, because we've been
Please.
talking all around it for the past 45 minutes.
Please.
But the God solution, as proposed in my book of the same name, is for humanity to actually redefine God. Is for our 4,200 religions on the planet to at least agree on one thing. They can have their own doctrines, they can have their own dogmas, they can have their own teachings, they can have their own messages, but could we at least agree on a single statement that all the world's faith traditions could embrace? That we have misdefined God, and that we need now to create a new definition of who and what God is. And the book proposes what that definition is. The book offers a 2-word definition of God. This, by the way, does relate to the question you asked, and you'll see how in just a moment. The 2-word definition of God, the most accurate definition that I know of the deity, is, in English, pure love. God is simply pure love. Now, again, here's that guy in the back of the room at my lecture saying, "Oh, Neale, more New Age junk. Come on, jargon. God, everybody knows. I've been listening to you for 20 minutes for you to tell me that God is love. Wow, what a great revelation. We already know that. All the world's religions agree on that." And I have to say to my friend, whoa, I have to say to my friend, wait a minute. That's not what I said. I didn't say that God is love. I said God is pure love. Now my friend in the back of the room will say, "Oh, what's the difference?" The difference is that pure love needs, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return. We can't even imagine a God like that. The God we've created needs and demands, expects something in return. We're supposed to love God with all our heart. We're supposed to obey God with every action. We're supposed to not do anything that God does not want us to do. We have this whole list of things that we're supposed to do in order to please God and not anger God. So we've imagined that God is a loving entity, for sure. God loves us, but God also will judge us. And if we are judged to have offended God, God will then condemn us and punish us. Wow. Now, why is that important? I mean, so what? People say, "Oh, Neale, so what?" People do believe that, but I mean, why does it matter? It matters because we have been acting with each other the way we imagine that God acts with us. That is, we have decided that if it's good enough for God, it's good enough for us. So how about if we, in fact, judge, condemn, and punish each other? Because this is a heavenly behavior. But what if we pull the rug out from under the idea of a God who is judging, condemning, and punishing? Now, what justification do we have to act in that way with each other? And that's the God solution, to decide that the essence of who you are is identical to the essence of what God is. The wave is not something other than the ocean. It's simply an individual expression of the ocean. So the part of you that is divine is called as well pure love. Now, supposing you chose to inject that idea and that expression of love into everything that you think and say and do throughout the days and times of your life. Harrison, we can't even love the person on the pillow next to us that way. Much less the person across the street. Much less the person around the world, we don't even know how to love the person we say we are totally in love with in a way that needs, requires, expects, demands, and hopes for nothing in return. But that's what pure love is. Pure love says, my greatest joy is the expression of who I am, not the receiving of what that brings me. And the only way one could experience in this lifetime, at least the only way me, because I was a very stubborn person, I had to live through a year on the sidewalk to realize that I don't need, require, and demand anything in order to be perfectly happy and in order to express my joy in myself and my joy in life, and in order to get people back to themselves. And so we don't have to go through terrible, terrible, horrible life events to come to that awareness. We simply have to tune into programs like this. Like the show you're doing right now, which is sharing with people an extraordinary message. Folks, you are the essence of pure love. Simply decide to express that no matter what comes back to you in return.
Neale, I want to share some gratitude for you. So firstly, thank you for that beautiful expression. And, just holding that on your heart as we step forward as a collective is enough in itself. But I want to share some gratitude, for the life that you've lived and the books that you've authored. That teaching, it's such a big part of this show and the work that I do in the world, and to hear it so passionately expressed and embodied through you, it just inspires me from an individual level to take that on even more as a purpose and a inspiration for others.
I need to let people know that I do not think that this is embodied through me. I'm picking up a phrase you just used, to see it embodied through you. You said to me, Harrison, it's not embodied through me. I'm still on the journey. I'm still moving there. I am not an embodiment of pure love. But you know what's wonderful? At least now I know where I'm going. At least now I know the raison d'etre, the purpose of life itself. At least now I know the pathway that I choose to take. And I'm getting closer and closer every day. And I hope that on the day that I die, most people will say, he almost got there. He got pretty close. And I want 4 words on my gravestone. Now that was fun.
I think there's a very high likelihood, Neale, we'll get to that point. I have one question to finish off this chat, Neale. Before I get to that, if people have tuned into this beautiful frequency that you've shared today and all the wisdom, the knowledge, the understandings, the life experience, and they are feeling pulled to your beautiful book, The God Solution, can they find it on Amazon? It's out now, correct?
All people have to do is send me an email, and I will send them. I will upload to them on their computer my author's manuscript at no cost whatsoever.
Oh wow, you're not selling it?
No, I mean the publisher is selling it. They don't, because and understandably, why? I mean, after all, they have to edit it. They had to design the book. They had to design the cover. They had to get it out there. They had to distribute it. That costs money. So and they're in the business of putting books out that help people. So of course they want to make a profit to keep their business going. But anyone who writes me an email and says, Neale, just send me the author's manuscript, and here's the email address to send it to, and I'll send it right to them at no cost whatsoever, because I want this message to be received by as many people as possible. And I ask for only one thing in return. If you ask for the book and you read it and you agree with it, send it to as many people as you know. Pass on the link and send it to everybody. Let's start a movement.
Revolution, a love revolution. I will put Neale's details, his email to send that message to in the show notes. So for everyone that's tuning in on the podcast, you'll see the details. Just click it and take that action. Neale, I really am grateful and honored for your beautiful presence today. Thank you for the dance. My final question for you, and you eloquently answered it in many ways a moment ago, but I want to pose it again and see what else comes up in you. I refer to this as the cosmic love antenna. And in many ways, for me, the reason I do that is because along my journey, I've come back to the remembering that my higher power, my God, my source is that 4-letter love word. So I'm wondering for you, Neale, how do you define love in your world?
Kindness. I try to be kind to every living thing. People, of course, pets as well. The tree in my backyard, I give it a hug. I have a huge plant in my living room. I give it, believe it or not, I give it a little kiss on its biggest leaf every morning. And I say to the plant, I love you, pal. Keep on blooming. If I see a spider where it doesn't belong, I'll capture it if there's any way I can. Get a glass on top of it. Put something underneath that glass. Carry it outside. Return it home. Kindness is how I define love. And there is a question I want you to ask me. What is the most important message in the 3,000 pages of the Conversations with God
Please,
books?
Neale. Please, yeah. What is it? Give it to us.
I ask God, what does it take to make life work? What is it that I don't understand? And she said, Neale, it's so simple. It's so easy. You think your life is about you, and your life has nothing to do with you. Your life is about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. Yet when you experience and express that truth, you will discover that even the largest sense, your life is about you. Not about little you, but about big you. Because guess what, Neale? There's only one of us in the room.
What a loving little heart exclamation mark to end this conversation, Neale. I'm grateful for your presence. I'm grateful for your work, and I'm grateful for your time today here with me. It's been a pleasure, and I honor you and your work, my friend. Thank you for spending time with me.
Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to do so. How kind of you to have done that. And I appreciate it as well. Blessed be.
Received, Neale. For everyone that has joined us either live here on Facebook or LinkedIn or on the podcast recording, thank you for your time, your attention, your love. And I would inspire and encourage you today, don't just feel these words and take in these understandings. Take a step, take some action. As Neale has highlighted in many ways today, start to express that love and come back to that deeper understanding. Until next time here on the show, we send you love, we send you light. If this hits your heart, please share it out far and wide. But regardless, we love you unconditionally, and we'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Meagher, Meagher, spelled Meagher. Sending you so much love.